From our Chicago studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Samana Siddiqui. Our top story tonight. California police have arrested a Muslim professor in connection with the death of a pro-Israel protester. The Ventura County Sheriff's Office announced Aloy Abdel Fattah al-Naji was taken into custody Thursday morning. He is being charged with involuntary manslaughter for the death of Paul Kessler. His bail has been set at $1 million. Al-Naji is a computer science professor at Moore Park College. The incident occurred at a November 5th pro-Palestine rally during which pro-Israel supporters were counter-demonstrating. Kessler died after suffering a head injury following interaction with a pro-Palestine protester. The autopsy said he died as a result of hitting the concrete sidewalk. Al-Naji called 911 to seek help for Kessler and stayed at the scene cooperating with police. Another pro-Palestine supporter was videographed assisting Kessler. The Ventura County Medical Examiner's Office said Kessler suffered from skull fractures and swelling and bruising of the brain and ruled his death to be a homicide. 2 Muslims have been murdered and 2 have been injured in Islamophobic attacks in the U.S. in the last 4 weeks, unrelated to this incident. The House Ways and Means Committee held a hearing Wednesday to investigate the alleged nexus between anti-Semitism, tax-exempt universities, and terror financing. Chairman Jason Smith claimed tax-exempt charities in the U.S. are providing support, encouragement, and potential financing to Hamas and Hamas-affiliated groups. He referred to the government closing down the Holy Land Foundation after the 9/11 attacks as evidence. Smith accused American Muslims for Palestine, or AMP, of operating as an alter ego of the Holy Land Foundation.
Tax-exempt charities operating in the United States are providing support, encouragement, and potential financing to Hamas and Hamas-affiliated groups. This concern is not theoretical. In the early 2000s, the U.S. government identified and shut down the Holy Land Foundation in the United States. That foundation funneled $12.4 million from Americans to Hamas. Shockingly, a 501c3 entity called American Muslims for Palestine and its related C4 have been sued in federal court for operating as an alter ego of the Holy Land Foundation. The 2 groups have many of the same leaders and may be continuing the same efforts to support Hamas.
No representative of AMP or other accused organizations was invited to testify at the hearing. However, a number of Jewish Zionist organizations were. Anti-Defamation League Chief Jonathan Greenblatt declared that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. He targeted Students for Justice in Palestine, Jewish Voice for Peace, and the Palestinian Youth Movement. Greenblatt urged the IRS to conduct a thorough review of the tax-exempt status of any alleged extremist organization. Former Israeli official Noah Tishby claimed campus pro-Palestine groups are heavily funded, professionally orchestrated groups with close connections to terrorist organizations like Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and the PFLP. A recent Reuters Ipsos poll revealed a marked decrease in American support for Israel amid its ongoing war on Gaza. The poll included over 1,000 adult participants across the country. It indicates a nearly 10% drop in support for Israel since a similar poll was conducted in mid-October. A key finding of the latest poll is that nearly 70% of Americans now advocate for a ceasefire. This sentiment is shared across party lines, with half of Republican and 3/4 of Democratic respondents supporting this view. While backing for Israel has decreased to 32%, down from 41%, there is a growing call for the United States to act as a neutral mediator, a view now held by 39% of respondents. More Americans also oppose the idea of sending weapons to Israel, contrasting with the support for arming Ukraine. U.S. Capitol Police used pellet guns and pepper spray late Wednesday to break up an interfaith protest calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. This happened as top Democratic lawmakers gathered for a candidate event inside the headquarters of the party's National Committee. Protest organizers said shortly after demonstrators locked arms and blocked the entrance to the Democratic National Committee building, police rushed them without warning. Some officers were wearing riot gear and used brute force to remove activists. At least 100 demonstrators were injured during the police response, including one person pushed over a railing onto their head. Sumaya Awad, a member of the New York City Democratic Socialists of America, told the Washington Post. Awad said more than 80% of Democratic voters are demanding a ceasefire. Jewish Voice for Peace Action and If Not Now, which helped organize the demonstration, criticized media outlets for uncritically reporting a Capitol Police statement accusing activists of violently protesting. A Semaphore reporter at the protest refuted claims from some lawmakers that demonstrators tried to storm DNC headquarters. Controversial definition of anti-Semitism sparks debate. Details after the break, so stay tuned and we'll be right back. Welcome back. The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism is being used to justify punitive actions against Palestine advocates in Europe. According to a report by the European Legal Support Center, this has led to numerous human rights violations. The report documented 53 instances from 2017 to 2022, in which the IHRA definition was cited as a basis for firings, withdrawn job offers, cancelled events, and disciplinary procedures in Germany, Austria, and the UK. The group's definition was initially drafted in the early 2000s to standardize data collection on anti-Semitic incidents. It also established the notion that anti-Zionism could amount to anti-Semitism. Conflating the two concepts has faced growing criticism as it threatens academic freedom, free speech, and silences criticism of Israel. A group of lawyers has filed a complaint with the International Criminal Court, or ICC, asserting Israel's war on Palestine amounts to genocide. Gilles Devers, a French lawyer representing Palestinian victims of Israeli violence in Gaza, submitted the complaint at the ICC office in The Hague this week. If accepted, it could lead to the issuance of arrest warrants against high-ranking Israeli officials, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Devers said all the criteria for the crime of genocide in Gaza have been met, citing precedents from cases such as Rwanda and the former Yugoslavia. The complaint aims to urge Western governments to take a stand on human rights versus genocide. Although Israel does not recognize the ICC's jurisdiction, Devers believes this does not render the court ineffective. In 2021, the ICC ruled it had jurisdiction over serious crimes committed in occupied Palestinian territories, including potential war crimes by any party involved. Belize has suspended relations with Israel, citing war against Palestine and the ongoing bombardment of Gaza. The Central American nation's government announced Tuesday it is recalling its ambassador. It is also withdrawing the application for accreditation of its honorary consul in Tel Aviv. Belize said it repeatedly condemned the actions of the Israeli military in Gaza and called for an immediate ceasefire. However, Israel has not ceased its violations of international humanitarian law and has not allowed aid workers to alleviate the suffering of millions of people. Belize joins a growing number of countries breaking off relations with Israel, recalling their ambassadors or withdrawing top diplomats. These include Bolivia, Colombia, Turkey, Bahrain, Jordan, Chad, and South Africa. In a significant move, 330 delegates to the Democratic National Convention, who have supported Senator Bernie Sanders' presidential bids, urged him to introduce a resolution for a ceasefire in Gaza. In a letter delivered Wednesday, they implored Sanders to introduce a Senate companion bill to a ceasefire resolution previously presented in the House of Representatives. The delegates emphasized the need to go beyond symbolic gestures and condemnations. They called for lifting the Israeli blockade of Gaza and the end to U.S. military funding and expansion of Israeli settlements. More than 31 members of Congress have already expressed support for a ceasefire, though some have conditioned it on the release of Israeli prisoners in Gaza. Sanders has been vocal about the need for a humanitarian pause and to stop the bombing. He called for action from Congress, the Biden administration, and the international community, but has not called for ceasefire. The first fuel delivery to Gaza since the start of Israel's war has arrived with the purpose of aiding UN relief efforts. The delivery of 24,000 liters of diesel fuel was approved by Israel for UN aid distribution trucks, but not for use in hospitals, according to a humanitarian source. Only 9% of the needed fuel has been allowed in, further worsening the dire conditions in Gaza. UN Refugee Agency Director Philippe Lazzarini expressed deep concern, stating that the use of fuel as a weapon of war is appalling. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is urging India to cooperate with the Canadian government's investigation into the murder of a prominent Sikh Canadian leader last June. Hardeep Singh Nijjar's killing in the Canadian province of British Columbia has set off major diplomatic tensions between the two nations. Canada has alleged New Delhi's involvement in Nijjar's murder. Blinken's plea came following discussions with India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar. The murder investigation has been ongoing since Nijjar, who was a Canadian citizen, was fatally shot outside a Sikh temple in the city of Surrey. In September, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau told Parliament his government was pursuing credible allegations linking Nijjar's murder to agents of the government of India. India vehemently denied any involvement and characterized the allegations as absurd and motivated. In retaliation, India expelled more than 40 Canadian diplomats. The Supreme Court's Conservative majority declined to hear the appeal of Michael Johnson, an Illinois inmate with mental illness. He had been held in solitary confinement without access to fresh air for 3 years. 3 Liberal justices strongly dissented, condemning the conditions of his confinement as cruel and unusual punishment. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson described Johnson's windowless cell as small and unsanitary, with unbearable heat and noxious odors. Johnson's mental state deteriorated rapidly during his prolonged isolation, leading to hallucinations, self-harm, and suicidal thoughts. Senator Peter Welch criticized the excessive use of solitary confinement, calling it unconstitutional and ineffective for rehabilitation. Research has shown solitary confinement is akin to torture, with brain abnormalities similar to those seen in individuals who suffered physical head trauma. The debate over the practice continues, with calls to reform or abolish solitary confinement gaining momentum. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping emphasized the importance of dialogue to prevent conflicts between their nations. The leaders met at the APEC summit in San Francisco this week. Biden stressed the need to avoid tensions escalating into conflict. Jinping highlighted the shared potential for success between both countries, saying turning their back on each other is not an option. He stressed that the world is big enough for the two countries to succeed, and one nation's success is an opportunity for the other. However, the summit was not without its challenges. Ahead of Jinping's arrival at San Francisco International Airport, clashes erupted between Chinese nationals and anti-Chinese counter-protesters. About 30 Uyghur, Hong Kong, and Tibetan counter-protesters voiced their disapproval of his policies. Hundreds of Chinese nationals, including students from UC Berkeley and Stanford, also gathered with Chinese Communist Party flags to welcome Xi Jinping. Some reports say Biden may consider lifting sanctions against Chinese officials involved in the crackdown on Uyghur Muslims as part of a deal to address the opiate epidemic, particularly the fentanyl crisis. That's all from our Chicago studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon for the latest updates. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Salam and good night.